Okay, I would like to call the meeting to order. This is the Governing Board Workshop meeting of November 12th. And I would like to have us, if you're able to, stand, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we do have a quorum with all members present. Harry is on the phone in front of me, and hopefully I'm going to try to talk loud enough, and we should all do that so that he is able to hear clearly. The first item of business is the approval of the minutes from October 8th. Were there any changes, additions, corrections to those minutes? Okay, hearing none, they will stand as written. Okay, the first two items, and a reminder to everyone, the workshop is not for voting. It's for discussion and information for the board. So you will be hearing a lot of discussion at this meeting. So Roberta Davidson has the first two items to give us some information on. Go ahead, Roberta.
Thank you, Madam President. During our tours, we went and looked at all three sites that were recommended. Originally, there were only two, but the representative from T-Mobile looked at one of them and thought that was one of the better ones over there in the area on the other side, outside of the social hall. And there were two locations in that area, and one is over between the tennis complex and the lawn bowling. And that seemed like an ideal site because a wall has to go around the cell tower, and that could be painted to match the tennis complex wall. But one of the major issues for all three sites is they have to be near a power source. So the group, my committee recommended all three sites. If you look over there, number 2 and number 3 are up here at the rec center, and the third one is over at the, near the tennis. And so we recommended all three. T-Mobile's going to pick what site they want and most advantageous. I know Russ took the representative and showed her the one that's over near the storage containers outside of the social hall in that maintenance yard area, and she seemed to like that one. But they might not choose Sun City West, they might choose another location. So just saying we recommended all three. Number 3 was our preference, but it's up to T-Mobile. So I don't know if this is something the rec center wanted, the board wanted to make their own recommendation on. But that's just where we are with the project right now.
So any concern about any of these locations? Is the board okay with the choices that the committee has made? Okay, it appears that those are okay with us. Thanks, Roberta. And the next item? You want to give some highlights of your tour? If each year.
First, I want to thank Carl Wilhelm and Russ Boston for their taking us around again on our tours. They do an excellent job, and the rest of the staff that accompany them. I know it takes time out of their day, sort of coddling the committee, but we muddle through. Out of our tour, and this is on the agenda for later, I think one of our major highlights is we wish we had toured the rip and sew cabinets, the room and the cabinets, before we made our recommendation. While we agree with that they probably do need updating, I think the committee was left with the impression from the presentation that the cupboards were falling off the hinges and there were a lot more issues than we were able to see. And while they and the other rooms over there, craft rooms in that part of Johnson, probably all need to have their cupboards resurfaced, we didn't think it was a priority for now. It could be delayed in the budget cycle. And that was the main thing we took away from our tour. There were some safety issues, especially with the trees over at Kuntz, but Russ said that's being taken care of. So those were the major things. We didn't have any major separate capital projects to push this year. A lot of the projects that we recommended last year are being finished up and will be later on in the summer for this year. And then all the news, anything new is basically like for Johnson, the lighting and the flooring and so forth. That's all part of the regular schedule in the capital projects and reserves. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I understand that, yes, that you were quite pleased with the condition of all of the areas, and that's really great to hear. So maybe one thing that we've learned from this is that when we do get these capital requests that are coming now earlier to us than they previously had done, with our new cycle that we've worked out, that it would be important to do an on-site view prior to a committee making a decision. So we'll have to look at the timing of that and kind of incorporate that into the committee projects so that they are getting a visual on that kind of thing. Jim, did you want to say something? No. Okay. Any other questions, Roberta? No. Okay. Next item. Any kind of charter club updates? Casey, I know that the first, you're going to give us a little bit of information or kick off the discussion.
Sure. Good morning. Not too much, just wanted to update that we have now 101 clubs. We have dissolved 2 clubs, which is Latin Ballroom and Canasta West. So those were for participation, and they really don't have enough membership to hold their own. And I'm actually going to pass it off to Katie O'Grady to talk more about Club Track.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we just want to let you know we're about 3/4 of the way through the training and deployment of the more than 100 clubs that we have here. So that was a lot of quick progress, and I just want to thank my team and the rec division for their help in getting that scheduled and getting that out there. We've had pretty good acceptance from the clubs. There's some that are a little less accepting because they've got some pretty good software out there themselves, but they are running dual systems right now. We appreciate that. Like we said before, we're going to be considering this a test case, test data through the end of the year. So everybody's learning. We're working on cleaning up rosters and getting people used to it. And we'll throw out this data on December 31st, and then we'll start fresh on January 1, and that will be good data going forward. So for those of you who haven't seen it, here's just a quick little demo. You can see it's a very clean, simple interface. It works whether somebody has a monitor or whether someone is checking themselves into the club. They simply scan their rec card, and it automatically comes up with their pretty picture there and shows the clubs that they're a member of. And some of them are touch screen, some of them will use a mouse. If they're bringing a guest, they use the drop down to indicate how many guests they're bringing, and then they just check into the club. They're done. This little message thanking Donna will disappear after a couple of seconds, and it's ready for the next person to check in. And then there's a couple different messages to be aware of. If they are not in our database, we don't recognize them, there'll be a number that says member number not found. So for these next 2 months, while we're cleaning up the club rosters, the clubs can let them in because we understand some of the rosters may not be good. The member numbers may need to be cleaned up. So starting January 1st, they need to take those messages seriously. But right now, it's just a learning what those messages mean. So that's one if they're not in our database. Another message would say, please see member services if there's an issue with that. If there's an issue with the club, for example, they try to check in, it'll say, please see a club officer. So it'll show if it's an issue with the club or if there's an issue with member services. So a couple different paths there. So pretty simple, pretty basic. And then on the back end, we'll have reporting that'll allow us to export the club roster, export the daily check-ins, the monthly check-ins, or the check-ins by member. We're still refining some of that reporting, so we don't have that to show you. But that's pretty much it in a nutshell, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Sharon?
2 questions, Katie. One, do all the clubs have computers?
We are providing hardware for those clubs that do not have.
Didn't hear you. I'm sorry.
We are providing hardware for those clubs that do not have.
Okay, so that includes the computer then itself. So are we going to continue to do that so that clubs that don't have computers will have one?
Yes, for those clubs that already have a computer and they want us to piggyback on it, we will. For those clubs that want us to provide the hardware, we'll provide the hardware. For the multi-purpose rooms like the social hall and lecture hall, we'll have a shared computer.
Okay, and then the other question was, in our agenda 3.01, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different kinds of card holders evidently, or non-card holders. So I'm trying to find out if those are going to be put in so that if you scanned your card, for example, you'd be able to say you were a charter club visitor or a non-card holder, or is that going to be added into the software?
No, so long as you have the capability of entering that club, and that would be an owner member, that would be a tenant, that would be an associate, and you're in good standing, it will just say thank you for checking in. It won't differentiate.
Okay, so we aren't really tracking how many of those we have then?
On our end, on the membership database, yes, we know very well who it is, but for this club software, it's not important.
Thank you.
Tim?
Katie, how often is this data going to be fed back to the clubs so that they can?
So that's something we're going to have to decide whether, how time consuming it is. The request we have the developers right now is to create an auto emailer. So it'll just send that report automatically. And I think that's functionality we can create. The roster, we can probably send back monthly. The reports, I don't know, I'll have to work with Casey's team on how often they need those daily check-ins. I can't imagine they need them daily, but monthly would be very reasonable.
Right, okay, thanks.
Jim?
Katie, you mentioned that there's data coming to you which is appropriate, and then that's going to come back to the club as a report. Will that will eventually replace existing software in a club? For example, there's attendance requirements in clubs, and for such things as lockers and usage of certain equipment, those kinds of things. Is that all going to be fed back? Can we use that as that data?
So it'll replace the CR4 as far as the attendance reports.
Okay, that's the general form.
But
yeah.
it does not take into account like the lockers. It doesn't take into account the monitoring. This was very basic. That is something we can consider for future development, but because every club has such unique requirements.
It gets complicated fast.
Yeah, so maybe
I
in the
agree.
future.
Okay, thank you.
Ann?
As I understand it, if you have a guest, you can check them in once and the fee is paid, and then they get a slip of paper that they can take and use for the rest of the day, and you don't have to be with them, is that correct? An owner member doesn't need to be with them?
That's
So-
at our rec centers.
Right.
Right.
But if someone checks in can they go to a club with that slip of paper, or that only gets them in rec centers or the library, or?
Yeah, as far as I know, you just paid to use the rec center facilities. I'm not familiar with what the guest usage policies are, and that's a question for Casey.
Casey?
Okay, and just wondered how we would handle that if somebody wanted to go to,
All
say,
club,
tennis or something.
all club members are to be accompanied by, I'm sorry, all guests are to be accompanied by the club member.
Okay, I want to make sure that was correct, okay. And also, what do you do like about a group like the cyclist? I mean, we have to turn in a CR4 with how many participate each day.
So
But-
we could theoretically do this mobily if we wanted to. I don't know that we care that 20 of you met at the church parking lot, went on a ride. But if you had a social in the social hall, we just roll out that common computer and we
Okay.
could count you in. So that'll be something we'll work out with Casey on what group meeting she wants to count on a group like that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Lisa, you had a question?
Thank you. So, Katie, I'm sorry, you may have already answered this, but I was reading something. So clubs are constantly updating their membership rosters. And so how often is this membership roster going to be updated and the information fed back to the clubs?
Right, good question. So we have a shared email box we've set up called Club Track, just like it sounds, clubtrack@suncitywest.com. And we've given a specific template to the clubs to fill out for them to turn in their rosters. They can turn them in really as often as they want. Obviously, we don't want a full roster change every day, but if they had a big change, especially in January when they do their membership drives, and they send those to us, we'll re-import the whole roster and get that cleaned up. In January, if they're adding 2 people or deleting 2 people every day, they can just send those 2 people. If they send it to that shared email box, we have several people that'll be doing those roster changes on a daily basis.
Great. Thank you, Katie.
Sure.
Other questions? Casey, anything else to tell us? You good? I think I'm good. Okay. All right. Okay, the next items Donna is going to be covering, and there are a whole series of them. As you know, we've been working on the RR&Ps, and I think that the things that she's going to address are things that might be a little bit content-wise a change, so she wants us to know about them and take a look at the recommendations. So go ahead, Donna.
Thank you, Madam President. The first item is added definitions in the guest policy. And again, this is being presented because the Charter Club Committee has been, again, approached with clear definition in the guest policy. And so with discussion, it was concluded that perhaps we needed to add some definitions, and the definitions specifically regarding what is a non-recreation card holder and a non-recreation card holder guest, a recreation card holder itself, and a recreation card holder guest. And again, this was to help members have better understanding with the guest policy. So the first one, recreation card holder, is a person who possesses an owner member, associate member, or tenant activity card in good standing, allowing access to recreational facilities and participation in association activities. Non-recreation card holder is a person who has no access to recreational facilities or participation in association activities without invitation and accompaniment of a club member. A recreation card holder guest is a resident of Sun City West with an owner member, associate member, or tenant activity card who is qualified to join any chartered club. A non-recreation card holder guest is a person who does not possess an owner member, associate member, or tenant activity card and is not qualified to join any chartered club. A chartered club guest is one who participates in any club activity and or uses equipment and or supplies within the club. This chartered club guest, an association guest fee is required. Charter club visitor is one who observes or tours a club activity not using equipment and or supplies within the club. And again, association guest fee is not required. And then within the RR&Ps.
May I ask a question?
Okay. Tim?
Yeah, just so I don't confuse myself, are these strike-throughs and red words for this change, or are they the accumulative strike-throughs that we've been looking at all along? Is this just the current changes or things that's been changed in the past from what they were?
Okay, so you're talking about the next section that I haven't gotten to yet.
Well, no, even well, okay, yes. But before you
Okay.
got into that, I'd like some clarification.
Okay. So, in the definition area, specifically where you see under recreation card holder in good standing, that when it was presented with the Charter Club Committee, a resident said, well, how do you determine if that rec card is in good standing? And so we said, okay, we will add that in that definition. And so again, the red is, the definition was presented, and then when the committee was to vote to move this forward to today's governing board, the in good standing was added during that meeting.
Okay, so this is the most current changes
Yes.
that you have?
Yes.
Same with the strike-throughs in the next section?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, Jim?
The Charter Club guest, association guest fee is required, is being added. Could you give me an example of what that would look like in a club? What club that would apply to? Because activities would take a whole myriad of things. For example, parties and activities of all kinds. Can you give me an example of what your thought is on this and how you would enforce collecting a guest fee from an association guest fee?
Okay, so for me, if I were, because I'm most familiar with pickleball,
Okay.
I go to the pickleball courts, and if I sit and I watch someone play, a friend, I'm just a guest and I'm not paying a fee. But if I come in and I go on the court and I actually learn to play pickleball, or I play pickleball, then I am participating in a club activity. Or say, for example, I decide that I want to learn, I don't know, rip and sew. I want to learn how to sew. And so if I were to go into rip and sew and go with another member who is a club member, and I would just sit and watch her and learn how to work a sewing machine, and I'm just watching, then I don't pay.
You
But
wouldn't pay.
if I try
Correct.
to run the sewing machine, now I pay.
So how would you enforce that?
Well, it would be the resident or the rec card holder who is taking the guest. So if I'm taking a guest, I know, and I have a responsibility as a resident to say, okay, we need to go in and I need to pay my guest fee because you're going to work the sewing machine.
Okay, let me give you another example. Every club that I'm aware of has a couple of social events. We encourage that because we're social clubs, and we invite guests to that. And we meet at Palm Ridge and we have a party. And you're saying that is a club activity, so therefore that would require a $5 guest fee. How are you going to collect that? How could you do that? How can you possibly enforce that? I think
The board institute policy, right? And if that would fall under operations.
But the policy has to be enforceable before you can't just make a policy and say this is a wonderful thing that could happen, but I don't see how you would possibly enforce anything like this.
Okay, Casey has an answer.
Don't make promises. Okay, so I'm just going to try and clarify some verbiage up there. Charter club guest is one who participates in any club activity. So I'm looking at it as the club activity that is kind of the activity that is done on a regular basis. When you have your social gatherings and you do bring a guest because you do that, then that is based off of something completely different.
But that's not what it says, Casey. That's not what it says.
Sure. This is for discussion, so we can
Okay.
come up with, do you have some other alternatives? Because you're correct, Jim, it's gonna be hard to monitor, and we, at this point, don't have that kind of software to regulate an outside guest association fee with the club, within a club.
Yeah. I certainly understand an example like pickleball, somebody, or tennis that people come and play, or bocce ball, those kinds of things that are participative. But there's other things. Rip and sew, not sure is a good example, because there's training that has to occur with craft clubs, metal club and stained glass, all of those. They're not going to let just somebody come in and use their equipment without, just because they pay $5. So
Agreed.
that's not going to happen either. So I think that we're trying to solve a problem that is very limited to certain groups with a blanket policy that's not enforceable. So the policy, I don't think makes any sense to me, in my opinion.
We're talking about people who are not rec card holders here.
But my
Correct?
sister.
Correct? We're not talking about,
Right, it's, well, I'm looking at chartered club guests, is one who participates in any club activity and/or uses equipment and/or supplies within each, or within the club.
Doesn't designate.
So it actually
right,
is
but
not
it
even
should
identified.
designate, because that doesn't,
Each
yeah.
club should have their own guest rules, and they should be followed, and that's the direction that I would go. Some clubs have 2, some have none, some have 4, some actually have 12, believe it or not. But that needs to be followed, and then the occasional guest is what should be absolutely followed within these guidelines. Now, I think what is trying to be explained here falls on the craft clubs, that if grandchild comes in, or, your daughter comes in for clay's a little bit different. That's touch and feel, so you can do that kind of stuff. But like you said, when it's rip and sew, PVP, wood shop, metal, anything that has machinery, you have to go through certain requirements in order to even become a member.
I would agree.
So it makes it a little bit unclear.
It does get unclear, and I think that if you make a blanket policy, you're going to have trouble. And there was a letter to the editor this week talking about people complain about rules not being enforced and people not following rules, and that's a problem. But especially when you have stuff like this, you can't follow it. How could we possibly follow it when it says everybody needs to pay a guest fee, but you can't enforce it? So another rule that we're not going to follow. So it doesn't make sense to put it in place. With this example as it is now, I don't know how you would rewrite it. It needs to be thought through much better than I wouldn't vote for that as it is now, though.
Tim?
Yeah, Madam Chairman, I have a question for, excuse me. On the club track, is there some mechanism or some viability in there that they could signal when a guest fee has to be applied?
I don't know how you would put the logic in there on that. I mean, if someone walks through a door without a card, how does the computer tell what kind of visitor that is?
Well, you're going to have a member list, right? If the person is not on the member list.
But it doesn't know if, yeah, I mean, I guess they would know then if they have a rec card but aren't in the club, it would know that.
Right.
Yeah.
So people from outside guests that walk in, they're not going to get scanned at all, right?
Correct.
All right, how will we know that they're there?
That would be, right now, it's very simplistic. So there's just a drop down as a numerical guest. And the clubs can use it however they want. So we have not programmed any kind of more complicated measure into there. So if we need to do that, we can. But the more complicated you get it, you've got lay people working these computers. We've already got some eyebrows raised. You want me to do what? So do we need to start talking about paid staff? The more complicated you make it, the more challenging it is, the more you have to question the data you're getting, because did they do it right?
Right, understood. But looking forward, if we're going to put together something that tracks club activities, having that functionality so that it does other things too that the rec center needs it to do, I think would be important.
Yeah, you could simply have it where it scans in this new person's rec card as a guest. Yes, we could program that in the future.
And clubs are still required to keep track of their guests, as they always have. We're supposed to, we'll put it that way, and sign in.
Roberta, you have a question? Roberta?
All right, one of my issues with this is that, first of all, it's micromanaging the clubs, which the whole lot of changes in the RR&Ps are doing. It's like, when does a club get to have fun and enjoy itself? It's doing too much paperwork. Who would run for office if they knew they had to keep track of all these things? But the thing about the guests, it's a blanket policy for over 100 clubs, and it doesn't fit over 100 clubs. I mean, like it was brought up, to use equipment at some of these clubs, you have to be trained, and you have to have gone through a process in order to be able to do that. So I don't think people are going to be coming into these clubs and using the sewing machines or the kilns or whatever, unless they were trained. But somehow we've gotten to the point where we're saying that if I have a relative come and they're staying with me, they're not playing tennis, they're not doing anything, going to the pool that requires that they have a guest pass. But I want them to come to my club meeting with me and sit with me, and you're saying pretty much you have to go up to the rec center, spend your $5, get a card, and come back. And I don't think that's what the clubs want to do. I just think this whole, I brought up earlier, these charter club guests, charter club visitors needs to be part of one of the categories higher up and better explained, because I just think it's too broad.
So they belong up with recreation card holder guest, et cetera, and that would clarify it, because in your case, they could come as a visitor, but if they're going to be using the fabric or the clay or the whatever, then that's a different story, and usually that's is taken care of in the bylaws.
But if they participate in something because they're with you, you're going to tell them, excuse me, you have to leave, go get your pass and come back.
Yeah, right, because they're not really consuming or using the equipment. Okay, so if we have other comments, otherwise I think this is feedback for Donna to revise this area. Tim?
While having one set of RR&Ps that cover all 101 clubs is admirable, doesn't it make more sense to have a set of RR&Ps for the craft clubs, a set of RR&Ps for the social clubs, and split the clubs into different categories? Why does not that make more sense? Then you could tailor the RR&Ps for that particular type of activity.
Well, it's an idea. Yeah. Okay, Lisa, you had a comment?
Well, this is going to go back to Katie's comment on the software regarding what she possibly can do down the road with the guest. And so regarding the guest fee, I would say that we would have to table this whole process till Katie is able to do anything with the software down the road, and we would have to go back and look at it then.
Well, that would be a period of time, because first of all, you want to implement what you've got going, as I understand it. But
Yeah, you're still going to have to send them somewhere else to take the payment, because we're not going to have charter club members taking payments.
Right.
And you talk about one set of RR&Ps for 100 clubs, one piece of software for 100 clubs. It's going to get complicated.
And possibly, is this something that we refer back to the president of each club? For example, if I were going to be bringing somebody into weaving with me, and let's say that it's my sister and she's non-rec card holder, but she is an experienced weaver and blah, blah, blah. So wouldn't I go to the president and say, hey, is this okay, and deal with it in that manner? No, okay. Lisa?
Thank you, Madam President. One other thing, and I did mention this to Director Maloney the other day when we were speaking about the RRPs, getting into, if you will, the weeds with this. In a lot of our craft clubs, when you bring a guest, they are not allowed to use the equipment unless they are trained on that equipment. And if we have a club out there that is allowing a guest to use equipment, shame on them, because this is a problem.
Okay, and I think that's what we're trying to clarify in our writing right here. And I think the feedback is that we're not there yet with that.
If I
Donna?
may, I'd like to just draw it to everybody's attention that, the top part, what we are currently looking at was just definitions to try to give an initial thought process as to what is a guest, what is a visitor. When we move down to the actual guest policy definitions, I would like to draw your attention to A, club guests. Clubs exist for the benefit of their members. Club guests shall be defined in charter club bylaws. When you move down to C, recreation card holder guests may attend and/or participate in club activities before being required to join a club per club bylaws. And again, non-recreation card holder guest is invited and accompanied by a club member to attend and/or participate in club and chartered club activities per club bylaws. And again, it is up to the particular club to give definition for their club guests, whether it's a recreation card holder or a non-recreation card holder. We are not using the definitions for rules for defining every 101 clubs. We are saying within the document, it is per your club bylaws. Thus, we don't need to have separate RR&Ps for craft clubs, for social clubs. It is per club bylaws that they define how they want to accept guests, whether they are recreation card holder guests or non-recreation card holder guests.
So that would allow, in Jim, in your example of your club bylaws may allow you to bring guests to the social activities.
Right. My club is four visits a year are allowed into our club without having to join the club. But they have to be invited by a member. They're not allowed to work on equipment, those kinds of things. But I'd have to take umbrage with what you're saying, Donna, only because when you put a document in the RR&P that says association guest fee is required, that's problematic to this. When somebody reads that, it says that that's what I have to do. It's not, it doesn't say per club bylaw, it says it's required. And so I think that that's what I'm having problem with, that you are putting a blanket statement on that everybody's going to have to pay this $5. Bike club has people coming all the time, and they just join in. They may be visiting from wherever and want to ride with the club. So we have to go to Johnson and pay their fee and take them on a bike ride. That doesn't make any sense. It can't happen. It won't happen. So
then, would you be satisfied if we just removed association guest fee, required or not required?
yes.
Then are you comfortable with everything?
I don't know about that, but I would be more comfortable with those two statements being removed, yes, because I think that they're too strong.
All righty.
Ann?
Well, in the first part, we've got the added definitions, and we've got a definition. And then we come down here and we say club guests, and we say club guests shall be defined in charter club bylaws. But up here, we've defined it. So why don't those two match? Those need to match. And the
Okay,
same for,
let's take a step back. I think we need to kind of explain where we're going with the RR&Ps. One of the things that I discovered in trying to work with Donna and with her chartered clubs committee is that we've got inconsistencies with that situation that you're explaining right now all over the RR&Ps. And my thought is that when these were developed, there were a set of rules. And then as something came up and there wasn't a rule that covered it, then somebody developed a rule and wrote in what needs to happen. And that ended up then being maybe in conflict or maybe repetitive to what was already said. And that kind of process just continued. And we ended up with 44 pages of gobbledygook that is so difficult for presidents to read and to function with. And there's a number of us that have been on boards of committees and pretty much have the same opinion that this is a mess that needs to be straightened out. It needs to be condensed. It needs to be clear, etc. So we've begun the process of doing that. What we wanted to bring to you with the items that are on here now are things that maybe are a change in policy that are different, and one of them is talking about the guest fee. So we need the feedback on that issue. And then I think you're going to find that we're going to come forth with a much reduced document. But in the process of doing that, you come across the things that you just pointed out, Ann. So these are just little lumps that we're working over. And Lisa has started to help us with that process too. We kind of need a clean look each time. And so we're working on something that can come back to Chartered Clubs Committee. But we need to have the concepts that are changing. We need to have your opinion on that. And I think what I'm hearing here is that you find that our definitions maybe are mucking up our process here. And so that's feedback that then Donna can take, and Lisa, who's working with her, and take that to get back to your committee, that we will review that. So that's what I see as coming up. Lisa, did you want to add something? You're chomping over there.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
go ahead.
Thank you, President Fitzsimons. I think that was probably well said. I think probably that 2.5 hours we spent Wednesday working on that, and we made a lot of headway. And I think probably what we should do is, if we can, take this and kind of table it, purge it in with that, what we are now going forward with, going forward into that table of contents, and making it a lot easier and more user-friendly for the clubs, for the presidents, and I think everybody will be a lot happier with it. And I think we can work on these definitions, and I think this will make everybody a lot happier.
Okay, so we've given the feedback to revise and do some further thinking on this particular issue. Okay, let's go on to the next item. Because some of the, well, I would go on to each one of these because some of them have a content change, and what we're talking about doing has no content changes. Lisa? Okay, that's, I'm not in agreement with that. I think we should go over these things because some of these are content changes, and what we've been doing is getting rid of repetitive kinds of things or doing a much better organization. So the next one, well, we're not there yet. Can we hold comments from the audience until after we get through all of our RR&P items?
Okay.
Let's move ahead with that.
I would just like to make one other comment, and that is when clubs have to define club guests, club visitors, and again, recreation card, non-recreation card, they should have some guideline in making that determination. And again, these definitions were to help
Help them,
clubs
yes.
make those decisions. And I will take this back to the committee, but I would just like to share that there was a lot of discussion on this issue and with a lot of audience feedback. And again, discussion
Yes.
with, so I will take it back to the committee, but I'm at a loss personally to explain to them what we need to change because
Okay, I think,
I don't know.
I think we're talking about the guest fee issue. Yeah,
And
and the
so-
definition of that. Is that correct? Ann?
Well, Madam Chairman, I would take, in the added definitions, I would just leave the top two, recreation card holder and non-recreation card holder. Define those, because then under guest policies, we start defining all these other items.
The others might not be necessary.
And so I'm not sure, after recreation card holder and non-recreation card holder, we need those other four definitions up there in the definition spot. That's mucking it up, because you're seeing one thing up here, you come down here, and the intent may be the same, but the wording is enough different that it makes you
Confused, yeah.
confused. Makes me confused anyway.
So that's the suggestion to Donna.
That's what I would do, because you've already addressed them down below.
Right.
So you do not want a definition for a non-recreation holder guest or a recreation card holder guest?
The only-
You don't want definitions for guests. Is that correct?
Or visitor. I would only keep the top two, recreation card holder and non-recreation card holder, because the other things, Donna, get addressed down under our R&Ps number 2 guest policy, page 18. You're discussing those, and so you're talking about club guests, that should probably say charter club guest, and then club visitor, charter club visitors, and then using the same wording, recreation card holder guest and non-recreation card holder guests. Because that's all explained down there. We don't need the definitions up above. That's just throwing in my 2 cents worth, Madam
Okay.
Chairman. Thank you.
All right, we have to move on. 3.02, is everybody okay with that one, Donna? That's just a short change. You
Right,
okay with the
and it-
words?
And that change being recommended was to be consistent with association bylaws, Article 8. A charter will not be granted to groups whose activities are similar in design and/or purpose as an existing charter club, excluding women's or men's clubs.
Okay, are we okay with that? The wording is better to match? Okay. The next one, Donna? Insurance?
Again, the recommendation on this, with staff approval, is the removal of deductibles for clubs being responsible. And it is removed from A, C, D, and again in Chapter 4, Property and Equipment, Item 6, removing deductibles.
And that was an issue with a lot of the clubs that were worried about that, so are we good with that? Sharon?
Just one question. In number A, the last line, it says that the coverage is only on property that is on the club's equipment inventory. What if it's not and you're standing on the property? Isn't it covered? Aren't you also covered when you're just on property of the rec centers? In other words, it can't just be equipment only. Isn't your coverage of the person who's standing on your property, if he falls down without any equipment around him, doesn't it still cover him?
Casey? Okay, so maybe the title, the category needs to be titled. In other words, equipment insurance versus personal insurance, or, yeah. So when we rework this, the category should be more explicit to make that good sense. Tim?
What was the reason for taking this out? I'll give you an example. If we have a club that goes in and does some electrical on their own without the facilities doing it,
Well, that's a no-no, but
and
yes.
they cause a fire, shouldn't they be responsible for the deductible?
They shouldn't be doing that in the first place.
Well, we all know the history that there's been a lot of clubs
There
that have.
that has happened in the past. We know a big situation with that. Sharon?
So isn't there a way to state exactly what Tim just said? If you do something that's not, other than not appropriate, but it's against the rules, that you have to pay a deductible? Isn't there a way to put a policy in? It's negligence.
That's an accountant kind of question, or a finance department question. Who have I got that wants to answer that? Or Casey, you want to? Nobody, nobody wants to address it.
All right, I am not a professional, so I apologize if this discussion is much farther than what it should be. But if a club does that, they're very well aware. Russ speaks and Carl speaks with all clubs very, very diligently. They will lose their charter. I mean, disciplinary actions will absolutely be taken, and it only takes one person to ruin it for everybody. And that's how I see it. If we're requiring a club that has to give us a deductible, well, if we're dropping their charter based off of them being, what's the word I'm looking for? Irresponsible, we get their money anyways because it's in the dissolution for the bylaws. So, ultimately, if that happens and they are doing work that we have staff that can absolutely do and not communicate, that's disciplinary action. They lose their charter. And when you lose your charter in that sense, the club's money goes straight to the rec centers.
If that was the case, we would have a couple of clubs that would have already lost their charter.
Maybe I wasn't
haven't.
here for that. I don't think I was here for that.
We're
So,
starting a new era,
Yeah.
Tim.
But again, I don't understand why, if the club is negligent, they're not responsible. Because the action that you're taking, Casey, is after the fact.
But it happened. So you're saying if they did it and didn't tell us, we still wouldn't know until the incident actually occurred.
I'll use my example again. Club widget makers, okay? They've got 5 widget makers, and they rewire them all, and it causes a fire that destroys some property. Now, since they did that without Russ's permission or acknowledgement, shouldn't they be liable for some of that damage?
They would lose their charter, and whatever money is in their funds. Well, okay, so like I said, this is not the expertise of me here. I'm just the one that got up on the pedestal here and trying. So I think the association was trying to work with a lot of clubs that this was concerning for, that don't have the money for deductibles. So we're trying to work with the clubs. We've listened to everybody. We had a full house here when we went over this. We listened. Accounting listened. Accounting came back and said, we can take these deductibles out. We can be helping our clubs. This is our job, is to help our clubs. Now, if they are going to be negligent, then there needs to be disciplinary actions, and maybe now we add that into the piece. Yeah?
I would not push this forward unless something like that was added, that the deductibles are for negligent behavior by the clubs.
Well, that's an easy statement to add.
We can add that.
You could make it less specific too by just saying deductibles would apply should negligence or irresponsible behavior occur, something along those lines, and keep it more broad so you don't have to, you can apply it.
Good.
But
Would that
I
be
have to
good?
say, as a woodshop member and as I've been involved in clay clubs also, that Russ and Carl make it very clear that if you touch that box there with electrical, you guys have problems. So the clubs know that this is the rule. So stay away
Understood.
from that stuff. It's the right
Understood.
thing, yeah.
It's happened
But
in the
as you
past.
say, it has happened in the past, yeah. But that's why they say that too.
Okay, so the feedback, Donna, is to add that to this section. Right?
This is Harry.
Harry, hi, Harry. Speak up.
I am listening, so I agree with what Jim says totally. I think you need to tell the clubs that they could be liable and that they are subject to the deductibles. I don't need you need to tell the dollar amounts or anything.
Okay,
That's all.
okay, great. Feedback will add on. Next one, Donna?
What number are we on there?
07. Uh-oh.
Alrighty, so this is,
Don, we need you to call Harry again. Don's not here.
Jack, can you call, I don't know where the phone number is. Kathy's.
Somebody
Kathy's
needs to
probably got it.
recall Harry.
Kathy's got it.
She's got it. Okay, so Donna?
the next item is a recommendation to make a change to our R&Ps on page 37-38C. And this is based on Tim's bringing this to our attention at our last meeting. And again, it is the last sentence of C, paragraph 3. It did say, if approved, clubs will bear the cost of materials and labor. The recommended change is, if approved, clubs may bear the cost of materials and labor. And again, this was... And this was brought to our attention due to the Rip and Sew request, the fact that they were making a request and did not have the funds to pay for that.
Sharon?
Okay,
The phone went away. You have to call me back.
We got,
I'm on now?
yeah,
Okay.
we got you. We got you back. Okay, Sharon?
okay. First of all, on the previous page is page 37, which you have the very first one that you did not cover. My question is,
Okay, we got you.
my question comes back.
You're back, Harry.
Okay, my question comes back to Bill about the asset transfer, because this, I want to know whether asset transfers also falls under this because of the unchartered clubs.
Bill?
So I don't know where that falls, or whether we have to write another policy about it, or what's going on.
Where was that? What are you referring to, Sharon?
Okay, on the bottom of page 37, it says the requirement for simplified inventory list must be included in the charter club's bylaws. I'm asking about the ones that are now unchartered clubs and what we do with asset transfers, and is this where it belongs? As far as a policy
But that has
goes.
nothing to do with what I just
I'm just
brought
asking
up.
if this is where it goes. Is
No,
all
there
I
is
know.
another section in the RR&Ps that covers exactly what you're asking.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, there is a whole category and dissolution of clubs and, yeah,
Okay,
it is covered. Not related to this. So are we okay with changing will to may? Roberta?
All right, who determines or what determines who pays and who doesn't?
Yeah, well, I guess that's not covered here, and we were just changing this to satisfy Tim, who recognized that all of a sudden this didn't fit with what we were trying to do. Maybe that's an operations thing?
Yeah, could I answer that? Basically, what they do when they apply for the CR13 is basically asking the association to do something. So the person who makes the decision of whether or not they're going to do it is going to be the association as an operational issue. But I do have another item to put in here that goes back to what Roberta had said in her report. Shouldn't we put in here somewhere that a site visit by properties must happen in here before this gets approved? I mean, that's what we were talking about before.
Yes, although there is a section in the RR&Ps that does indicate that in the process of doing this, that does happen, but it doesn't talk about it happening prior to.
Well, what would be the good of having it afterwards?
Right, well, that's what we found out, right, that the timing of it needs to match.
I mean, I would think that the site visit by properties would be part of the recommendation process to the association to do it or not do it.
But isn't that also tied to when the submissions for capital projects have to happen?
Right.
And then there's a club meeting or a property meeting after
That new
that?
policy actually asks the request to come in before the properties have actually even met. So I'm just saying, somewhere along the line, before that approval process gets going too far, it needs to be visited by the properties committee.
Okay, so let's make that note that needs to be added in, but I think this is the section that we kind of revised and tried to put it in a number 1, 2, 3, 4, a process. So we'll make sure that that's included.
That needs to be added in, but I think
We're getting a recording echo here.
He's watching it, and it's reporting back.
He needs to turn off his TV.
Oh, yeah, you need to mute. Harry, you need to mute. Okay, a little humor. Yeah, there is a delay. Okay, now hopefully he's mute, then we won't hear that again. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Donna?
Okay, the next item deals with club monitors, and it was presented before the committee.
Bank accounts?
The bank accounts. Right?
All righty. This is on RR&Ps, page 33, and this has to do with operating bank accounts. And there was a lot of feedback received regarding the 110%. And with discussion with the finance department, they were okay with removing that. So the recommendation is to remove the sentence, year-end balances should be no more than 110% of the previous year's operating expenses, and recreation activities manager may approve exceptions. Thank you.
Okay, we okay with that? Okay.
That's not what's written.
They're removing it.
Oh, you're just taking this out? Okay, so my question, Donna, is operating bank accounts is the title. You don't really mean operating only. You're talking about reserves, you're talking about all kinds of bank accounts, correct? Not just operating. Or are you referring to operating being accounts you work on?
I guess.
Again, this, for example, the reserve fund is a separate area.
So you have this just for the operating accounts
Yes.
only? Okay.
Yeah, there's another section for that. Okay.
Okay.
Then on?
The next item is RR&Ps, page 21 and 22. This has to do with club monitors. And the committee had discussion because it seems that there are some clubs that are struggling with getting their membership to follow the rules for monitoring. And they would like to have some recourse for that noncompliance. And so it is recommended to add club bylaws should set forth monitoring requirements and membership privileges which may be denied for monitoring noncompliance. And this allows clubs to deal with their noncompliance issues in their club bylaws.
Okay, are we good with that? Roberta?
I've been complaining about this one for 7 years. Not every club has monitors. They're called other items. You know, other, like the Boomers, we're all hosts. We have no monitors.
But that's the same responsibility.
Well, not in the true sense. So, you know, I think we have to make it broad enough that it's not just the word monitor or people acting in that capacity.
So maybe that goes into definitions.
Like I said, I've been complaining about this for 5 to 7 years.
Lisa?
Donna and I talked about this on Wednesday, and I think that I felt that we were covered in the sense that the beginning of the statement read, "Club bylaws should set forth." Roberta, do you feel that that's acceptable? I felt it was acceptable, if that works for everybody.
Okay. Sounds good. Tim?
I agree with Lisa, but doesn't that remove the necessity for A, B, and C? If I can make a general comment, there seems to be a lot of things in here that really belong in the bylaws. And we talked about having different sets of RR&Ps. There needs to be a set of RR&Ps that refer to the various clubs' different bylaws. Because the Metal Club's going to have a different bylaw than the Deer Valley Men's Golf Club.
Well, there are standard things that you have to have in your bylaws that have to be verbatim.
Right.
And then other things that can depend on the individual club. I think this whole page, yes, has a bunch of redundancies that we did talk about and probably have condensed greatly. So, okay, we lost Terry.
Another redundancy on that, it has to do with the C there says during all scheduled activities, a designated monitor must be provided and identified to ensure established operating procedures are followed. But the R&Ps also said that there has to be 2 people in the club, period. So one of them doesn't have to be a monitor. So I mean, there's discrepancies and inconsistencies. Yeah, I agree. It's hard to put another blanket on this thing, though.
Okay, so when we rework that, we'll take a look at that?
Yes.
Lisa? Okay. Okay. I think when the work gets done and things kind of come together, I think you'll be somewhat pleased with the new product, but I think this is a process, that we're working through. So we appreciate the feedback that we've gotten on all of these things. And let's move on ahead. And I'm also thinking that, maybe I'm thinking out loud here, but we might need a special little meeting where we do nothing but talk about the RR&Ps because this seems to be wordsmithing with 9 people, and that doesn't work very well. So, okay, do we have any discussion, comments from the audience on all these RR&P issues? Jack.
Jack Leary, 128260. On the definitions, one of the things that I observed is that the definitions.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, on the definitions, one of the things that I observed is that the definitions are not mutually exclusive. A non-resident card holder could be a non-resident card holder, could be a non-resident guest, and could also be a club guest. So I think that when the definitions are made, per Ann's suggestion, keep them as simple as possible.
Okay.
The other thing that I wanted to mention is I get this feeling with the clubs that, as Roberta said, there's some big brother, some micromanagement. And if you think back to the conversations we had during the IRS situation, it was said at that time that the clubs are separate and independent of the rec centers. And if we start putting stuff and start trying to regulate and rule each club with the same set of regulations, it's going to be very difficult to manage these. I agree with Tim's idea of having separate types of bylaws for each category of club. We're trying to cover too many issues with one big blanket statement, and we're never going to get over that. We're just going to be continuing to redo these RR&Ps over and over. It's going to be a constant churn. So that would be my suggestion.
Okay, we'll take that into consideration. Anybody else from the audience want to comment on just on RR&Ps?
Peggy Harding, 130829. I'd like to comment on the definitions as well. There seems to be a conflict for your associate member, a rec card holder versus a rec card holder guest, and this comes into conflict when you're playing golf. So the situation is my significant other pays the dues. He's got the associate member card, and is he a guest or is he a member? And that affects your golf rate. Thank you.
Okay. Tim?
He's considered a member, but if you play too, then you would be paying the outside fees.
Okay. Oh, another one? Okay, on the RR&Ps?
I'll try to be quick. Bruce Hart, 134227. I got here late, I'm sorry, so I missed the deal on rec cards and everything. And I just want to make a comment. Have we addressed accurately or enough rentals and especially Airbnbs? If Airbnbs are going to become more and more and more of an issue in my mind here. And if you go online now and look in Sun City West for Airbnbs, you'll find there's right now I could only find about 15 of them. And there's about 50 or 60 home rentals, I think, overall. But that's just some numbers I could find. Here's my concern. When you go onto the Airbnbs, they I believe, try to game the system a little bit. They even publish on their sites on how they can do an Airbnb and then only, and here was a printout from one of the sites, and they just tell the people, you come into this beautiful community with all our facilities and everything else that we're all paying for, and then you rent this Airbnb, and then you can go down, one person, you can get a whole bunch of people on Airbnb, but then just one person has to go get the rec card, maybe the monthly rec card, and then everybody else in the Airbnb can use our facilities as a guest of that card.
Madam Chairman.
And I believe, I wasn't here before earlier, and if that is the policy, and I just think we should pay attention to those policies and the abuse of the rec cards.
Okay, we're really talking right now about the RR&Ps, and that has nothing to do with your question. Maybe at the end of the meeting, maybe Riley, you can address that. Okay, so we'll go back to that, sorry.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay, that's all right. Okay, let's move on to Tim Hurley is going to talk about some policy, recommended policy changes. As you know, we have each of our committees reviews their policies that relate to their topic, whether it's properties or RRPs, of course, would be because of chartered clubs, et cetera. But there are policies that are not related to any committee. And so Tim has taken on the responsibility of taking care of LC&M that are not reviewed on a yearly basis. So now he's doing that and working his way through that. So go ahead with the ones that you have, Tim.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This actually goes back to the board's goal-setting session when there was some discussion about what is the difference and what is the priority between bylaw 4.17 and the policy L9. And what this rewriting of policy L9 seeks to do is to clarify the difference and the priority between bylaw 4.1 and L9. And basically, I'll just read the parts that have been added. The filling of vacancies is the governing board's responsibility under bylaw 4.17. This policy, L9, establishes a procedure for filling any vacancy on the governing board when following bylaw 4.17 fails to fill a vacancy. There was some discussion earlier on as to what goes first, the bylaw or the policy. Bylaws in our order of importance always supersedes the bylaw or the policies. So by changing this, that basically clarifies which policy comes, or what the bylaw comes first and then the policy. And I suggest we move this forward for a vote.
Any questions, comments, board members? Okay, do we have our agreement to move this ahead to a vote at our upcoming meeting? Do we have consensus? Okay, I'm hearing the nods. Okay, all right, we will do that.
Sue, are you going to take speakers to that topic?
We don't vote at this meeting. Let's wait until Tim presents both of those, and then you can have a comment.
Well, the other one's separate. It's really not related to that.
Related? Okay, so you want to take the comments now?
Sure.
Okay.
K. Williams, 101-631. I was the governing board director in 2014 when this policy was written, so I feel obligated to give all of you a little history lesson because none of you were on the board at that time. Quickly, there was a vacancy on the board in July 2014. The new president, a little befuddled, said what to do because it was blacked out for summer. So he went to former presidents and asked them how they would handle the situation. At their suggestion, he sent an email to current directors to ask them how to provide him with the names that people they thought, that the current directors thought might be adequate replacements to become a director. At the time, 2 of the directors were out of state for the summer. 1 was out of the country on a vacation. 4 of the directors submitted names to the president, and 1 stated he had asked 3 or 4 people, and they all said, heck no. Following past practice, he intended to appoint one of these people with board approval. However, at a special meeting July 28th, 2 of the directors were opposed and wanted to notify all owner members of the vacancy and allow them to apply and to be interviewed. There were notices published about the vacancy. Candidates had to submit their applications by August 11. The board's goal was to have a formalized process to fill vacant positions that occurred due to death, illness, or resignations. Major concerns were the past practice of just appointing someone, creating continuation of the good old boy policy, lacked transparency, created cliques to push through pet projects that did not focus on what was best for Sun City West. Special meeting was held August 4th. 2 directors submitted a draft policy. Another special meeting was held August 18th for the purpose of the entire governing board interviewing candidates who had applied, and by secret ballot, the directors selected a new director. Also at that meeting, the board unanimously approved the L9 to provide future boards a fair and clear process for filling vacancies. This process has been used numerous times over the past 7 years. I urge you to reconsider the changes being suggested to L9 today. I'll be happy to answer any questions if you have them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kay. Bernie?
Bernie Reed, 131417. I'm wondering why the sudden need for this change to the policy that put our current governing board president on the board before she ran in 2018. I do not remember her saying the policy needed changing then, nor do I remember 2 of our other governing board members who are seated on the board today thinking the policy needed changing during their terms, especially since they both used the policy to place both Sue Fitzsimons and Anita DeGumbia on the board. In fact, the policy was used to place the director who has brought this change forward on the board at a special meeting held on July 14th of 2016. It worked well those times as written. Now all of a sudden there's a need to change the policy that's been in effect and used to fill vacancies since 2014. Suddenly it needs to be changed to say that bylaw 4.17 should be used, and if they can't fill a vacancy, meaning a tie vote, Then they will use the policy L9. So what's so bad with policy L9 as it's currently written? And since it was not followed in placing Tim and Jim on the board this time, then why does it need to be changed? Even though 3 of our board members thought it appropriate to follow policy L9 in the last selections, the president overrode them. If you do not have to follow the policy, then why the need for the change? Policy L9 was put in place to allow for transparency of the board. The policy simply says, it is simply the outline of how the governing board will comply with bylaw 4.17. It in no way takes away from that right. It doesn't change the bylaw. It simply says how the governing board will go about filling the vacancy. It allows all of the residents of this community to apply, not just a selection from 1 or 2 individuals on the board. I have said before, I think both Tim and Jim have served the community well during their terms, and I was not against their selection. But you could have and should have followed the policy that gained you your seat the first time and made it a transparent process as is set out in the current policy. Instead, you were able to hand-pick your new members and set it in a letter to the community that we had to get them in. A rush was needed, so you did not follow the policy. But one of the vacancies came at the May 20th, 2021 meeting of the governing board when Bob Carniero submitted his resignation effective June 1st. I urge you to think about this. How important is the integrity of the governing board? How important is openness and fairness to the community, to this board? I urge you to vote no on the change and follow the policy in the future to maintain the transparency our community needs.
This does not change policy L9 in any way. The remaining body of the policy stays the same. All this does, no it doesn't, all this does is to clarify the difference between 4.17 and this policy. The bylaws supersede policies. That was what we wanted to try to establish by putting this change into the policy.
And that was vetted by the attorney. Thank you for your comments. Let's move on. Next item.
May I respond?
Anybody else want to talk first? Any comments from our board here? Brief.
It doesn't change anything, or it does change, because what you're saying is this policy will only be used in the event there's a tie. All this policy does...
In the event that 4.17 does not produce
all this policy does is say how you're going to go about using 4.17. 4.17 requires a vote of the board.
Right.
This doesn't change that at all.
No, it doesn't. So what's
but
your
what
point?
you're saying is this will not be used unless you can't come up with something like is selected here.
Yeah,
this
you got
policy
it. That's
has been
exactly
used,
the purpose for it.
This policy has been used
Okay, Bernie,
every time since
that's enough.
2014.
You've had your 2 minutes, and this is not a forum to sit and argue. The board has been presented with this, and we're going to move ahead to a vote on it at our next meeting. Okay, the next policy.
Okay, next policy is L12, library copies of records. Basically, what the rewrite of this policy is to do is to bring the association into the digital era while providing for analog residents, okay? Basically, what it does in a nutshell is eliminates the need to have hard copy records at the library. And since most of the data now is already online on board docs or the association's website, it makes the need for having hard copies at the library unnecessary. In the case that people aren't computer literate, they can go to the library computer section and they can get help and have documents printed out as they need, okay? And that's members who are unable to review the documents online may seek assistance at the R.H. Johnson in the Earl Mackard Data Resource Center. And current library policies regarding printing may apply. And then at the end, 2.1 is several of these items are already online, and several of them are on board docs, several of them are on the association website. And the only thing that I would ask the IT group to do is to have these all placed in one place so that they can't all be accessed at the same time. either in board docs or on a separate page on the website where these things can be kept and maintained.
Okay, questions from the board? It's trying to bring us up to date, but Sharon?
The legal information, are the members in the community allowed to see any of the legal information?
There's a restriction on, actually this comes out of the Arizona statutes, that there is certain information that is restricted if it has to do with an employee, if it has to do with someone's health, or if it is other personal information that is not available, should not be made available to the residents.
So if they wanted to see that, since it's not listed in here, where would they go?
There's actually a bylaw that it's included in. I don't have reference to the number, but
So it's in-
10.06.
Right, so it's in the fact that, what I'm saying is you said these are the only reports that would be available at the library. Am I correct?
Yes,
It says
there-
not limited to, so I'm just asking, is legal also included in this?
By legal, what are you referring to?
Well, if I wanted a legal opinion, I want to know what the legal opinion was and it was asked, and it's not about personnel, would this?
That's restricted.
That's all restricted,
information.
so no one except board members are allowed, or whomever are allowed to see this?
Right.
Okay.
If it has
thank
to do
you.
with a lawsuit or pending litigation, that's all restricted information. And bylaw 10.06 does list the things that are not available. And that comes straight out of the ARS statutes.
Okay.
Okay. Other questions? Okay, are you okay to move this on to a vote at the end of the month? Consensus for that? Okay, all right, okay, we'll move on. Okay, the next item is 3.12, capital improvement projects. Carl?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me today. I would like to start off with just a little reminder of our capital project planning process. My presentation today is all about that. Last year, we worked very diligent on revising the addendum that kind of provides us the flow chart, as you see on the screen here, on how our capital project planning process begins. Nothing in this chart that we worked on last year has changed from our policy. All it is guiding us correctly through our policies and an explanation of the month timeframes to get our budget process solved. So you are here is in violet. You can see that through the months of October and November, anything that was considered new capital was presented to all the committees. So chartered clubs, properties, and budget and finance have reviewed any of the projects that have been proposed as new. And all of these committees have also seen the document that I'll be sharing with you today, with the exception of budget and finance. Budget and finance has, Ann Brown and Karen Rokin and I had a discussion a week ago after the Properties Committee meeting that they were canceling their early month BNF meeting and would review the same documents that I'll be sharing momentarily. And that worked according to governing board timelines. So we are here in November, and I will go over the proposed capital improvements list to the general manager. Today's list is for the general manager. It is a list that you'll be reviewing over the next few months according to the capital project planning process. These are in categories of new, reserve study modeling tool items, which means repair and replacement items. It has been broken down by golf and our policy allowances. Beginning with new projects, we have on this list, we have the Rip and Sew Cabinet CR13. We have Beardsley's Clay Club Monitor Station and Storage remodel and build. And then a few new items. I'll explain these. Environmental Services Maintenance Yard Property Fences and Gates. So over at Environmental Services Maintenance Yard, Staff has proposed to make that more secure by adding gates to the entry by Fry's, and to put a fence from the Hillcrest property line up to the social hall. We would maintain the block wall that exists between Fry's and the Environmental Services Office, and the cost would be $44,000 approximately. The R.H. Johnson Maintenance Yard Storage Connexes, in the current budget, I'm going to be facilitating a build-out for Environmental Services offices. That is going to disturb where their connexes are currently stored. Staff has asked, since that disturbance takes up a little bit of their space, we would like to take those couple of connexes and put them by the dirt pile that's in the maintenance yard, and put a gate on the front and the back and a small steel roof over the top, so that we can secure some of our golf carts and vehicles after the office addition is done. Over at Beardsley, staff has asked for another item called Arts and Crafts Storage Yard Ironwork and Gate Addition. Currently at the Arts and Crafts building, you have a nice mason area enclosure with a trash container, clay club, clean out basin. On a regular basis, that area is being broken into. Things are being stolen or damaged. We would like to raise that block wall with iron, decorative iron, and along the walkway at the Arts and Crafts building, create a nice iron gate and fence so that nobody can go in there after hours. Just make that compound nice and secure. And then finally, in the new category, this is a community project. The rec centers of Sun City West streets Lasso Drive, North Lasso Drive, and West Limewood are dead-end streets. They are on the southernmost portion of the community. These are the streets that used to go to the Del Webb development build-out areas. So when homes were being built in the community, these streets allowed the contractors to come in with the products for the homes and build the homes. Currently, they are just chain link fence gates, and they are constantly being broken into. We are getting traffic of undesirables, and we would like to make that a full masonry block wall. And discussions with architectural and other community sources like fire, this is an appropriate project if we choose to go forward. So that concludes the new capital items. The next page you will see is all R&R from our reserve study modeling tool. I'll give you a brief synopsis. We have 2 asphalt projects proposed in the next year. One at Deer Valley for the Pro Shop parking lot, mill and replace, and the R.H. Johnson parking lot, Section 2. Section 2 at R.H. Johnson is from the south wall of ARC, between Men's Club and ARC, carrying all the way through the library, pickleball areas, library, to the common drive in front of the sports pavilion. So these would be the 2 asphalt mill and replacements, very similar to what you've experienced at Palm Ridge and Kuntz. And Kuntz, to my happiness, is finally done too. So we would approach this in a discussed multi-phase capacity for R.H. Johnson, and that would be determined down the road. Moving on, we have 2 flooring projects. One at Palm Ridge, aquatics flooring entry. This entails the small carpet area you see at the very lobby, and then the stairs and the carpet in the elevator, and up at the top at the walking track. A large flooring project is the admin flooring that has met its useful life. This is a pretty heavy logistic project, and working with staff and timing, most likely planned for the summer. We would do some paint improvements. We would do the lighting improvements that'll be proposed in this budget, and change out that new carpet. Moving on, we have a couple of projects, items considered projects. The aquatics outdoor pool shade canopy fabric is due for replacement, and then the R.H. Johnson mini golf lighting and wiring replacement. Continuing on, we have recreation equipment, drapes and motors over at Palm Ridge, and a floor cleaner. And then we have our yearly HVAC unit replacement. This particular upcoming year is a very slow year for Russ and his staff to have to do HVAC units. There is only a couple. This previous year, they've done on a huge amount, so we're kind of caught up, I believe. All right, moving on, I have 16 roof projects, 13 of which are flat restorations of the flat roofs for the pro shops and the pro shop maintenance yards out on the center of the course. And then 3 of them are for our rec facilities. Kuntz Maintenance Building by the tennis facility, R.H. Johnson's Men's Club roof, and the R.H. Johnson Arts and Crafts roof. Our next section is also R&R. I just categorized it separately with accounting so that we get a clear vision of this budget. This is the golf items. We have an irrigation system replacement at Grandview. We have golf maintenance equipment. The next line item is golf maintenance vehicles. Shoreline replacement at Grandview, number 13. Yearly golf carts for golf courses, approximately 20 carts. The replacement of golf ball dispensers, 7 of them, 7 courses. And then the line item for greens mowers and utility vehicles. And then finally, in this proposed budget to the general manager, we have our allowances. We have changing demographics, ADA compliance, energy conservation. I would like to point out in the energy conservation, this is a much higher total than what we normally have, between $30,000 and $50,000. We are proposing a $370,000 allotment, and that is due to the fact that R.H. Johnson is the final rec center to have all of its interior lighting converted to LED, and this would finish the energy conservation program. All 3 other rec centers are 100% complete, including parking lots. R.H. Johnson's parking lots have been done approximately 4 years ago. And then moving on, we have our yearly safety and structural integrity allowance, well pump replacement allowance, information technology, and 1 for equipment. And I'm open for discussion.
Okay, any questions of Carl? Comments? Tim?
I have a question, Carl. This has to do with the irrigation system replacement at Grandview. My understanding was that was going to be split into 2 projects. Is this a total for both projects?
That is not the case. This is the second phase of that singular project.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Ann?
Well, piggybacking on what Tim said, is this finalized with Arizona Department of Water Resources, this irrigation?
Bill, could you help me with that?
Sure. Well, Todd, you want to jump up?
Oh, I'm sorry, Todd.
Certainly. Yes, we've been in communication with ADWR on this, and they're, I think, very pleased with what's going on here. Todd can attest to some more of the detail, but we are within this irrigation project. It's also a water conservation project, new piping, no leaks, those types of things, and there's a sizable amount of turf to be removed around non-playable areas, landscape, xeriscape type things. So it's a major plus. So we are following all of the rules that the ADWR has in place currently, and what they plan to change in Plan 4 and Plan 5 leading up to 2025, when most golf courses in the state of Arizona will have to play by a whole different book of rules per se. But Todd, you want to touch on?
Yeah, just a couple of things. I think we're getting real close to having everything worked out for the 2025 fifth management plan with ADWR in relation to how much turf are we going to have to remove on the 4 golf courses. And so right now we're at about 50 acres in total for the 4 golf courses that we have, the wall-to-wall turf golf courses. So we're getting very close to that. And we're doing the mapping over at Grandview right now as far as turf removal and the offsets from the property lines. And just taking 15 feet in around the whole golf course on Grandview, that gets us about 32 acres. So we have some road crossings we're going to be looking at. So again, I think we're getting real close to coming up with a plan that's going to satisfy ADWR as far as the 2025 fifth management plan goes.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And Carl, I had one other question. because I don't understand all this stuff, but what is a Connex?
Connex is simply those shipping containers that you see on semis and trains. They're purchasable, and we do own a few. ARC Club owns 2. They will stay reasonably in place, and they'll be kind of used as the backbone of R2 and just create a nice little compound.
Okay.
I learned a new term today. Thank you.
Lisa?
Thank you, President Fitzsimons. Carl, and I'm sorry, I can't turn around, so bear with me.
That's okay.
Maybe you might want to throw this over to Pat O'Hara when we get to him, but I have a question regarding the golf maintenance vehicles and the golf carts. Have we looked at all at any of those going electric, or do you want to throw that over?
Okay, that has been studied, but,
and I know Pat had that in his presentation at the end of year when we did that last year.
Right.
So I didn't know if any of these were looking at those. So do you want to throw that to
Yeah,
Pat?
go ahead,
later
Pat.
on?
Sure. Good morning. Yes, every time we look into the purchasing of carts, we see what our options are. And we haven't made final determination on these, but we'll look at it. I think we're still a year or two away for us, but we'll consider it and see what the cost and what we have to do to retrofit all this stuff. But yes, it's always in play.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Sharon, did you have a question?
To that point then, Pat, maybe you can also just stay right up there. Are we considering for a new project to add electricity to any of or all of the sheds, where you would be keeping the golf carts and having this put into as new going forward? Because we're going to have to eventually have electric golf carts at some point.
Right. So the structure themselves should be adequate. It's the plumbing, if you will, of electricity, right? Wiring for electricity.
Right.
So that's something that we'll continue to look at and see what the cost is.
Yeah.
And I work with Russ and Carl on that, and eventually they'll give us some bids. But we've got some preliminary bids of $30,000 to $40,000 per location.
Okay.
And as we move forward with the lithium, we'll check into that too.
Okay, so do we have any estimate like then as how many, do all of the sheds around have to be plumbed for electricity? Because when I asked that question before, you had made the comment, sorry, I can't turn around, made the comment that there wasn't any electricity in there. So I'm kind of asking this basically because are we doing this on a going forward so we're ready? If we went out and got the golf carts, it wouldn't do us any good if we didn't have any place to plug them in. So I'm trying to be a little forward thinking.
So when we purchase golf carts, we don't purchase a whole fleet at a time. We purchase the 20 or 25. In fact, I've purchased as few as 3 carts at one time. So the way I see this rolling out would be at facility to facility. We would do a Stardust, or we would do a Pebblebrook, and we would take on that fleet of lithium per location. That's just the way we've always bought our golf carts.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions? We'll be seeing these budget items throughout the year, so, but any other preliminary questions of Carl? Ann?
Thank you.
President Fitzsimons, I did want to comment, and Carl touched on it earlier. BNF has not seen this. I know the other charter clubs and properties have advanced this on for the governing board, but BNF will be looking at it on Tuesday, and then we will weigh in at that point.
Okay, great. Then we'll be looking for your committee's advice at that point. Any other questions, comments? Okay, we have a comment from you have to come to the microphone, comment from the audience. Your name and your rec card number.
Jane Childers, and my number is 130746. Your line item on information technology, what is that line item?
That is for the IT department. So an allowance is for things that come up in the year that are out of sequence or unknown, and there's just some funds sitting there so that the general manager and the governing board have the opportunity to solve.
Well, being a member and having come here for the last 4 winters, I'm finding that your websites are really insufficient, and most recently, the website concerning the tickets and the problem you had over the tickets, that's been going on for a long time. And I think that your website is probably one of the poorest websites I've ever seen. From golf to anything. And I know I'm a newbie, 4 years, and I'm only here in the winter, and I'm not even a heavy tech person. My husband is, but I find it almost impossible to navigate in your system. And most of the people I talk to have expressed the same feeling. And hey, whoever, is Kathy here? Kathy is, thank you, Kathy. You have an incredible employee there.
We do, we know.
I just met her the other day on the phone, but to handle people's, not complaints, but issues, yeah. So anyway, I'm gonna throw it out that that's really why I came here today, to throw that out to you.
Okay, so you're suggesting we spend some money and update things?
More than that, yes, I
Okay.
really think it needs to be all redone,
Okay.
completely. And it's outdated, you have old information, anyway, I
Okay.
won't go on, but thank you.
Okay, thank you for that input. Any other comments on the presentation from Carl? Casey?
I'll wait till Carl's done, but I want to talk about the ticket thing.
Okay, that'd be great.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, Carl, thanks. Okay, and then Casey, in response to the comment that the woman just made.
That's Jane. That's our mustache competition lady from the barbecue. Thanks, Jane. So first off, I'm going to publicly apologize for the inconvenience. Trust me, I feel your pain. On the other end, though, we are in the process of changing that over. This was a third-party vendor issue. I put in a ticket right away. I called them. I did urgent. I did everything I could. They didn't get back to me till 2:30. I sent them a nasty email. I'm not going to lie. So I truly, from the bottom of my heart, I will take on the full responsibility, but we are moving forward and going to try and find another third-party vendor for our ticketing system. Our IT department has nothing to do with that. I just want to make sure that everybody understands that. I work with them, or Dee Kumant, who is the box office supervisor, works with them as well. So they have sold their company to another party, Neon One, just in case you want to know that. And it has been nothing but issues. So we are currently working on finding a new vendor for that. It is not something that you can just snap and fix. So it's going to be a little bit of a process. We want to make sure that they can accommodate all of our needs. We're a little bit unique here. And in the past, we have done a lot of research. So it's time to do it again. I understand. So we're working on that. We came out of COVID, and here is a hiccup that we need to fix. So I apologize.
Thank you, Casey. Okay, let's move on to the next item on the agenda, capital improvement pledge relief, and I think Ann and Bill are covering this. I don't know who's doing the first talk, but Ann?
Thank you, President Fitzsimons. I will start this out by prefacing a recent meeting, and I'm not sure it was BNF or workshop. I don't remember which meeting it was, but Bill talked about what he was calling loan forgiveness, and I brought up the question. We have a couple of clubs that have what we have traditionally termed loans for projects, and a couple of them, pickleball and tennis, will be taken care of with the arrangements that are currently going on, but stained glass and what was the other one?
Help me.
Tennis.
Tennis, okay. Tennis was going to have a smaller balance left after their current arrangement. And my question was, if these are loans, and I was not on the board when any of this happened, but if these are loans, then are these clubs going to be responsible for income? Because any of us as individuals, if we have a loan forgiven, should have income. We had a lengthy conversation with not only our association attorney, but also CPA concerning many of these. And the best way I can term this was his explanation, the attorney said, if any of you listen to public television, they have what they call pledge drives. And oftentimes they'll ask you to do an extended pledge. So perhaps you tell them that you're going to give them $1,000 a year for the next 10 years. You don't want to take a hit of $10,000. You may not even have it, but you're going to pledge them $1,000 each year for the next 10 years. So 5 years goes by. All of a sudden you don't like any of their shows, or your kids go to a more expensive college, or you need a new roof, whatever happens, you don't want to give PBS your $1,000 that year. So you don't. They can't come after you. What they will do is, I don't know how they do it, but either each year or at the end of 10 years, they'll write out for whatever they haven't collected, because they do not have a legal instrument with which to collect. And that is exactly how we are here. We do not have legal instruments with these clubs. So, Bill, have I summed it up?
Yes, very good, and thank you. This has been a project, and we are kind of, I think, nearing the end. I will further your comment a little bit, talking about a few staff in the room. But Kathy Peterson has been working diligently with ourselves and our boards and our committees, working with our legal team and the CPAs and coordinating all these meetings and I mean, from an industrial intelligence perspective, she's the queen of the house. And thank you for everything that you do. Mr. Finelli, hats off to you and your team. Cliff is not in the room, I don't think, today, but all the work that you've put into this, trying to figure out this 501c7 scenario with the IRS. Thank you very much for all you have done, and Casey, dealing with the 100 and some odd clubs on an individual basis, kind of walking everyone through as best we can, because they are all very different and do different things and are funded differently. And I mean, it was a pile. And so here we are trying to get to the end of this. And there's just a couple of things that we'd like to kind of, I think, clean up when it comes to Pete and the books and how we do our annual audits. And now we're talking with pledge relief. And I think Ann summed it up very, very good. We have never loaned any clubs any money, the association. And my history goes back 2.5 years, close to 3 years now. Not in my tenure, but in the past, things have happened over the course of time that has allowed some of these clubs to at least step out of the circle of compliance, per se, when it comes to the IRS codes. And essentially, you know, the analogy we like to use is we're just trying to put the train back on the track here. And a lot of the clubs, 80, 90%, are doing absolutely just fine. Whether they're C3s, C7s, you know, they are independent agencies. And all we're really trying to do is help them stay out of trouble. So we've come a very, very long way in a short period of time, really. But where we're at today is just talking a little bit about these pledges and the fact that we don't really have any outstanding loans. That's a misnomer. And when you talk about loan relief, you know, you're kind of giving money away. Not really in this case. So we're talking about pledge agreements, and I think Ann summed it up. Talking with our attorney, the big ticket item in dealing with any kind of pledge or anything like that is enforceability. And I think that's what the legal team will look at, and how what do we do? Where's the teeth in this argument as far as what do we do if someone doesn't pay? Again, based on what the feedback that we're getting from our legal team and the CPAs is, when it comes to this type of arrangement, there's really not a whole heck of a lot we can do. In the state of Arizona, state statutes basically say if these clubs opt not to pay, or they come up with any kind of financial troubles themselves and don't pay, basically it goes away in 3 years. Statute of liability, help me. There you go. Statute of limitations are what they are in the state of Arizona, and when it comes to this type of activity, it's a 3-year window. So if we did nothing today and sat on our hands for 3 years, there'd be some outstanding pledges on our books that Pete would have to deal with for the next couple of years. We can do that, no questions asked, and the books just get audited, and at the end of the day, 3 years from now, they go away. Or we can step up and just kind of clear the plate. And that's kind of the direction I would personally like to go as your general managers, just to kind of, hey, we know we had a problem, and basically, let's fix it. So statute of limitations is there. The fairness amongst clubs. We went through a whole series of capital improvements a couple of years ago, expanding club rooms and giving them more space in which they needed. Some clubs were given 1,500 square feet, no questions asked. Some people got a little bit less than that, and with no financial commitments involved. It was just a show of need, and it was budgeted and approved by the governing board, and off we went. Some clubs basically opted to be a little bit more charitable and pledge some money regarding their assistance. And so there's really not so much as fairness involved, but it's how clubs get their money to pay some of these things back. So again, from a legal perspective, if we were to erase what is pledged on the books, was there a tax liability? That was the big question. The CPA and the attorneys both came back and said that does not constitute revenue to these clubs. They would not have to pay tax on their outstanding balances. So that was a big cleanup issue that we had to get resolved. And so moving forward, the clubs are clean. So that's good. But when it comes to compliance with the IRS, it's basically unrelated revenue thresholds that were getting these clubs in trouble. So in speaking with a couple of the clubs, Tennis and Stained Glass, we were just curious as to how they are going about and how they were treating this pledge. Where's the money coming from? And in the world of Stained Glass, they don't have an exorbitant amount of craft sales per se. So that really wasn't where the money was coming from. They were conducting raffles. And so they would sell, I don't know, throughout the year, they would do these raffles and they would collect outside money. And then, whoever was winning the raffle would get a percentage. And Harry.
Just hang on.
And so they were using that revenue to pay back their pledge. That method of collecting revenue was basically in conflict with the IRS. That's outside money coming to that club. It's not membership money. So to enable the club to continue to pay us back what they have pledged was putting them in jeopardy with the IRS. So let's not do that. And the same thing with Tennis. They were collecting a lot of money through advertising and naming rights. The naming rights contracts are still good. That money is coming to the association, not to the clubs any longer. So that avenue has been cleaned up. But again, paying back what was pledged by the tennis community or club to the association, again, was coming from advertising and outside money. And we just want to make sure that stays clean. So that's kind of where we're at. We really don't want to be forcing clubs to fundraise, because that, again, is part of the problem with code compliance and the IRS, and that's kind of where we're at. And so I'd be happy to answer any questions regarding this, but I think where we'd like to kind of move forward a little bit is to basically allow the budget and finance team to be able to clean their books.
Thank you, Bob. This is Ann again, Harry. I did want to comment that we have two clubs, which are ARC and the Rotary Club, that are 501c3s. Those are not involved in this. Those are organizations that can legally fundraise. And I think if you recall, at our last meeting, we had ARC make a presentation on what they had made. And so the amount we're talking about is $39,000.
Yes, ma'am. The tennis balance would be about $9,000 once we collect the naming rights balances that are due with the naming rights of Mimos on the tennis center. So they would have about a $9,000 balance, and I believe Stained Glass, which are ahead of the payment schedule, believe it or not, relative to their initial pledge was $50,000. We've collected 20 at this point, and so we're looking at $30,000 there.
So there are only two clubs involved, and the other clubs are 501c3s.
Yes, and I would throw in Friends of the Library there as well, as far as a C3.
Thank you.
Right. Ann, is your B&F committee reviewed this yet, or is that coming up?
That would be, we looked at it a few weeks ago when
Okay.
it was called a loan forgiveness.
Okay.
And it was just informational only. We did not vote on this because technically this
Right.
is an operational issue.
Right.
And we just weighed in on it. I will comment with them. I don't remember if I put it on the agenda or not, but I will just give them an update at the end of the
Sure.
meeting
Okay.
that this is pledge relief now.
Okay, do we have questions on the board here of Bill? Harry, you want to talk first?
Okay, I didn't get to hear all the conversation. My phone got cut off again. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, a couple things I think that should be looked at, Bill. The first being that if, get a written statement from the attorney and the accountant on these issues, because that's going to tell us a lot what they'll put in writing.
Okay, he's
The
nodding
second
yes.
is when they talked about the statute of limitations, the statute of limitations for our unrelated income, unreporting of income, if over 25% of the income is not reported, you have a 6-year statute, not a 3-year statute. And with the forgiveness of income, the 3 exceptions are bankruptcy, insolvent taxpayer, or debt cancellation as a gift. And I don't think those would fit. And the IRS always uses substance versus form. And what is the substance of the transaction? And when you look at that, if the debt is forgiven, even if there's no note, I think it's an issue that needs to be addressed.
I don't know if, Mr. Finelli, you want to jump in on this when we did talk with the hop up. Debt, again, I'm not the lawyer in the room, but we did have conversations with the legal team. There's a big difference between debt and pledge. And so I think the attorney has advised us, and we will get something in writing, Harry. Thank you very much for that. But when it comes down to this forgiveness of a pledge, really the main point that the attorney was trying to strike home with us is the enforceability scenario as the number one ticket as far as allowability and legalese as far as that goes. And that's kind of where we're at. I'm going to defer to Mr. Finelli if you want to add anything to that, sir, please do.
You just actually said what I was going to say, the number one criteria, and this was for IRS regulations only. The CPA we consulted did notify us that enforceability was the number one criteria. When he saw the documents that were presented, he saw, as Bill referenced, that there was absolutely no repayment, no enforceability, no caveats that this would impact you in what manner. It was his interpretation that this would not, this would be item number one that would say this would not trigger an IRS recognition of revenue for the clubs. However, I noticed that Harry, that Bill did put a star by this, and going back again to the separate entities, we would strongly recommend that the individual clubs, and they were given this recommendation when we met with them individually, both tennis and stained glass, to seek their own CPA interpretation of this. So we'd love to have Harry meet with them to bring your years of experience to their representation, but that is the recommendation that we would make.
Okay, thanks, Pete. Any other questions? Tim?
It seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the problem is not the fact that the clubs pledged to pay the money back, but the problem is that they were using outside revenue to pay it back. That's correct. Okay. How many people are in stained glass? Roughly 300? 214. Okay. What are your dues every year?
We reduced them last year. They were 30,
So if they took the 200 members and charged each of them $25 a year to pay this off, they could have it paid off in 5 or 6 years. It wouldn't come from outside money. It's from the club members' money. And when this deal was all put together, that was before the IRS issue came up. The club agreed that they were going to pay back the money, okay? And I was on the board then, and we went through a lot of ups and downs on the whole stained glass thing. I still think the clubs owe it in good faith to repay the money. And not to repay it with outside sources, but to repay it with member sources. So I would think that they could make a pledge to pay this back at maybe a longer period of time, but by doing it just with club member funds. Same thing for tennis.
Other comments? Sharon?
Okay, so I'm a club now and I want to have something remodeled and I don't have to pay for it.
That doesn't have anything to do with the fact that they have already agreed to do it.
Right. I know, but if you're going to not
You
charge.
can't take today's standards and apply it to something that happened to go.
Well, I can. Yes, I can.
Well, you would be wrong in doing it.
Okay, I'm just saying that this is going to come up again and again where we probably should have been upgrading things to begin with on a regular basis of doing that, of whether it's increasing the size or not in our own facilities, and that shouldn't be paid by a club, in my opinion.
We have been doing that. We have been doing that.
Well,
Several
was
of the
their
clubs,
request someone
several
awful?
of the clubs over the last couple of years have had their rooms expanded. They've had rooms added on. So we have been doing that. To saying that we're not keeping up and doing things to ask the clubs what they want to do, it's not the case. We have been doing that. I mean, his R&R program all along has, that list that was up there, that's all proactive, repairing things to keep it up to the standard that we live in, okay? All I'm saying is that even though it was under a different set of circumstances, the club agreed to do it. Now, they didn't know about the IRS, they didn't know about outside funds, so okay, let's give them that. But I still think fair play says that they owe part of that money back. Now, if he wants to forgive a certain portion of it, but I still think the club needs to pay some back.
Okay, Lisa?
So, thank you, Director Fitzsimons, President Fitzsimons. The question that I have is, if we go forward with this forgiveness, or whatever the terminology you decide on, and we move forward with it, what's to stop the other clubs that we loaned money to, that they paid back the money in good faith in previous years, and they step up and say, hey, we paid back money, and now you forgave them the debt, and we want our money back? I mean, are we, I know it's probably a reach, but have we thought that far ahead, and
Certainly.
did you?
Certainly.
Okay.
And so, we're kind of in a couple of questions here with Tim and you, really. Excuse me, the issue of force majeure, right? When someone is making a pledge, I think they had in their mind a funding source in which to do that, right? They had, hey, if we could help raise some money, whether it's the sale of crafts, whether it's, how individual clubs were raising money. Some are very lucrative, right? And so they have an ability to make a pledge like that and have a comfort level repaying their pledge. But in the world of force majeure, in these contracts that we have, or these agreements that we have, when there's a major shift or a change, then you basically get to reassess that contract and where are we? And that's what we did, right? So the IRS is now looking at outside money and how these social clubs are operating, and they were not in compliance with the rules and regs for a nonprofit C7. So their outside money that they were using to repay their pledge stopped, and hence the kind of the fairness thing. And I don't want to force folks to fundraise or force folks to get outside the box again. And so that's kind of the thought process for us as far as forgiveness goes. Now, the other clubs that are outstanding, be it ARC and the Rotary Club, They're 501c3s. Nothing really has changed in their world. They continue to raise funds and operate as they normally have, and they are continuing to repay what they said they were going to repay. And until they opt not to, would be the time to have that discussion as far as what are we going to do. But as far as their contract goes, when their agreement goes, again, enforceability comes into play and some of these other things, we'd have to deal with it at that point in time. I don't foresee them not paying. They haven't really stepped up, and during this whole conversation that we've had with regarding the IRS, you know, they've never come forward saying that they're in a pickle or they're having difficulty raising funds and meeting their obligation. That has never come in to the conversation. There was an issue, I think a year ago, in 2020 perhaps, I think early, excuse me, when the COVID thing was peaking and they had a shutdown of clubs and it kind of curtailed a little bit of their fundraising. They asked for a little bit of a break, which we granted, but they're back on track. That help?
Thank you.
Other comments from the board? Okay, where do we go with this? Do you need our approval or not?
I think, back to Harry's comment, I'd like to be able to get something in the file from our attorney and the CPA, as far as if you want something in writing to basically, you know, enforce or detail what we've talked about today. But just quite frankly, I mean, I'd like to work with Mr. Finelli and his team, as well as our outsourced auditors, and just basically do what we can to clean these books up, as opposed to just letting them linger for 3 or 6 more years. It's just like, we'll deal with it. And if these clubs want to come in and donate some money to us, and like was explained, I think, earlier in Carl's presentation, was it the Clay Club that stepped up and they're contributing 20 grand to a project that they'd like to have in their club? And I think we continue to work with these clubs in that regard, as far as if they do have available funding resources, we'd love to be able to work and partner with them.
Ann?
Well, now that you brought up the Clay Club issue, because, well, I did want to say the Clay Club was very transparent when they came to us, and they showed us their balance sheet, and they do have the money in hand. But I would want it to be some kind of agreement that we don't even start that project until they've put that $20,000 in an escrow account, so that we will not have to come back later and say, oh, well, you know, I don't distrust these people, but I'm just saying, so we don't find ourselves in a position again. I think we should ask that be put in some kind of escrow as part of the agreement to go forward with that. But that's a future conversation.
Lisa?
And to that note on Ann's statement, at our last meeting, where we left off with was Pete was waiting to hear back from, I think it was the IRS, on that ruling as to whether or not we could even accept that $20,000 from the Clay Club with this outstanding, where we kind of sit with this whole ruling with the IRS. So if Pete has that information.
Pete?
We did, and there's no issue.
Say that again.
I was going to say that we did, and there is no issue.
Okay, thank you. Ann?
President Fitzsimons, one thing I think is, if I recall from our conversation, that is seen as a donation from a club. And so that's why there is not an issue.
Okay.
So.
Great.
Nothing.
Any comments from the audience? Okay. Oh, wait a minute. Lisa? Let Lisa go first.
I'm sorry. I just have one last question that I was going to ask, and I don't know if Tim kind of was headed this direction. The last question that I have is, with stained glass, why did they lower their dues from one year to the other? Do we have that information?
We can have that answer,
when
but
they had money outstanding?
I would assume that it was because you had it raised so that you could earn enough money, and now that you didn't need to make the money. Is that correct? Come up to the microphone and give us the real answer.
To my understanding, the dues were always $20, and when we faced this expansion, we needed to come up with the funds for whatever we're calling this monetary venture. It was dropped back because we have some funds in our account right now, and we are in discussions of possible, what are we going to call this, forgiveness or... And so it was, and again, our board was split on that as far as do we anticipate this being forgiven or not? And so in anticipation of, they shed a little bit of the money and lowered the dues. So it lowered back to what it was at 20.
Okay, thank you. Kay, you had a comment?
Just a question. I noticed, Bill, when you referred to the tennis balance and also the stained glass, I didn't hear you mention what the plans are for the $70,000 that pickleball is obligated for us. Thank you.
Thank you. There is, I don't remember the initial balance on pickleball, but they have paid back a sizable amount of money, and they do have like a $78,000 balance as far as their pledge. And what they have basically turned over to us was the agreements that they currently have with, I believe, Liberty Buick and Sands Chevrolet, as far as the naming rights at the two facilities that they operate out of. Excuse me. And so those contracts are rather lengthy. I think the Sands contract might have 4 or 5 more years on it, and somebody sitting in this chair in 2038 will close the books on the Liberty Buick naming rights scenario. So the money coming in from those contracts come directly to the rec centers now, as opposed to the pickleball club, because there was like a 50-50 split going on there. Now 100% coming to us, so that will take care of the balance. Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead, Harry.
Question on that, Bill, was those original agreements with pickleball, the contracts that the advertisers signed?
Pete's going to answer that.
No, those were with the association, as Bill referenced. Those
The reason I say that is because if that contract was to them, and then they turned it over to you in fulfillment of their obligation as payments over time, that's going to happen.
You broke up a little here.
Repeat the last part of your sentence.
So just, I can fill it in. Every year,
okay.
Roughly 350,000, Bill, was the original amount, and it was supposed to be over, don't hold me to this, I think as much as 10 years. Pickleball, using a lot of these resources for advertising and these tournaments, were generating a significant amount of benefit to them pre-COVID. And they switched it to a $210,000 to be paid at about $70,000 a year. We were in the last phase, and that's where Bill's referencing where that payment. Going to their CR7, every year, if you were to look at theirs, they would, on their CR7, they have the loan payment out to the right side on the expenditures, but we know that that is contained in 2 parts. They actually have 8,000 of that recognized by the 2 naming rights that Bill referenced, and then they make the adjoining 65,000 or so that comes directly from their club funds of advertising and these tournaments. So all Bill is really saying is they are asking to turn that last payment into a commitment to be forgiven the payment that's coming to us directly through the agreement that is with the association. And then I know that's to Harry's question, that's our money coming in, and it's just been applied to their loan. Now it's just going to, no, excuse me, good point, to their receivable. And that will take a considerable amount of time because it's at about an 8,000 clip for the first 4 years, and then it descends to like $3 or $4 grand for the remaining part. So that's why it takes all the way to 2038.
Okay, thank you. Pete. Okay, any other?
I'd make one comment on stained glass. I think this goes to Harry's point on the 6-year statute of limitation. And this may even go to yours, Tim. May not be what you want to hear, but if you put yourselves in their shoes, they had the 10-year pledge. They made the 20,000. They were, by a letter of understanding, simply a letter of understanding, as much as 4 years already into their 10-year commitment. They could turn around right now and just say, I'm not going to do anything for 2 years, and they haven't violated that letter of understanding at all. They could then take more draconian measures and just not pay anything further to it, at which point it runs up against the statute of limitations, and in 2028, the association has no means to collect that, even if we wanted to. So, you know, that's why I would like to, I think Bill's saying, you know, this causes problems for them. They're increasing their dues. It was a letter of fairness. When I got here, we had 7 different commitments, from, you know, ordained commitments to a piece of paper to a email, some none at all. That's what Bill was referencing about fairness. And also the concept of, if you have the ability to raise more funds, does that put you to the front of the line in terms of your governing board approval? I don't think that's what we wanted either. So really trying to end this and get it behind us.
Right. I think we had created a real unfair situation. Small clubs who had no capacity to earn any money then got nothing new. And I think that we're trying to get that straightened out. Another comment from the audience?
Just a quick clarification. I believe the motion on the dues was if the monetary amount was forgiven, or however we're terming it, the dues would drop. So again, maybe I misspoke, but it's an important clarification.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that. Okay, let's move on at this point. The next item has been removed from the agenda, and so we're on to frost and rain delay for golf. Pat.
I'd like to ask a question before he starts.
Wait a minute.
Why
Roberta?
Why is this something we have to vote on? Why isn't this golf operations?
This is information. Just
Oh,
information,
okay.
Roberta.
Okay.
All right. Good morning. Thanks for your time. Golf has some challenges at this time of the year. For those of you that do or don't play, we play all of our rounds, or most of our rounds, in the shortest days of the year. And with the shortest days of the year, that also brings cool weather. So one of the things that we wanted to inform everybody of was, after sitting down with Todd and going through this year after year, we always seem to run into some frost delays. This time of year, our first tee time is at 7:30 in the morning. And sometimes we can make that, and sometimes we can't. We've got a little history here. But I bring up this slide in front of you. This is a pricing sheet that we create every year. And this is created by the 1st of July. And it has all the different rates. It has range ball prices and annual card prices. But one of the things that it does have on here that is kind of pertinent is down here at the bottom, and you can barely see this red light up there. It has our tee time starting time. So as I mentioned, November through February, our tee times start at 7:30. And we wanted to make you aware of this and get your input on this, because we would like to, for the month of December, change it to 7:45. And that doesn't sound like a lot of time, but 15 minutes goes a long way early in the morning. And so to support that, Todd, for those of you that know Todd Patty, he is probably one of the best weather predictors I've ever seen. And he is, and I'm hedging his bet a little bit, it is being mentioned that we are going to have a dry, cool winter. But when we have dry weather, that's sunny skies, clear nights, and the temperature drops. So typically we're expecting, or at least we're looking forward in December, that we might have a few cool nights and frost delays, and that'll roll into January as well. And as you can see by our stat up here, and it's supported by these two slides that I'll get to, that in December last year we had 8 hours of frost delays. You multiply that by the 7 golf courses, and that's 56 hours that we didn't tee anybody off when we were supposed to tee people off. January is a little different story, and we might visit that here as well, but we're talking about December moving our tee times back from 7:30 to 7:45. And the goal of this would be to try to minimize the inconvenience to our golfers who like to play early. We're taking 2 tee times on each golf course away and padding it. And if we do have frost, it turns our hour-and-a-half frost delay maybe down to an hour. Could take a 15 or a 30-minute frost delay and may even negate that to just cart restrictions. So we're trying to be a little proactive here. We see the tendencies, we see the trends over the last few years, and we're just asking that some consideration be made for bumping them back. Try it for December, and then in January, if it works, you can see the numbers there. I believe there were 16 days I counted that frost intervened in our regular day's operation. And some people will say, well, 15 minutes in the morning, well, you get back on track. When we get into these long frost delays, it goes throughout the whole day. So people show up at 1 o'clock expecting to tee off at 1 o'clock, and they're being told it's going to be 1:30, 2 o'clock before they'll be on the first tee. So the 15 minutes helps us from an operational standpoint, and I believe it helps Todd from a setup standpoint with fewer staff members on his side right now. This is a win-win for both of us. So 15 minutes goes a long way.
Okay, I don't believe this has gone to the golf committee because they canceled their meeting, so they didn't meet this month. So Harry, you have any interest in weighing in on this? Or Tim, you're a part of that committee too. Harry, any comment?
I've already talked with Pat about it. I'm in favor of it. I think by doing this, if we move that time down, it'll still keep a good revenue stream.
Okay.
If you start changing a bunch of things, it could create a lot of problems and affect the revenue stream. So I'm totally in favor of it.
Okay. Tim, you had a comment, or are you in agreement?
Yes, I'm in favor of it too, but to tell you the truth, I appreciate the information, but I think this is an operational issue. I think you just go ahead.
Right, I would agree. Todd, did you want to?
Yeah, I just want to make a comment about what this will do for us in golf maintenance. It actually will help us, our greens, moors, and setup crews stay ahead of play. 15 minutes could equal 1, maybe even 2 holes ahead, depending on the golf course. Allow staff to maybe roll greens and break greenside bunkers during frost delay, and then also allow staff to break down frost and stay ahead of play by syringing the greens. And then some other detail work can also be done if we have the staff, like cleanup and clipping removal, ahead of play with that 15 minutes. So it's certainly going to help us.
So,
okay.
I have another
Tim?
comment. I have another comment. Pat, at Deer Valley Men's Club, we've got a policy in place for frost delays. If they happen on an odd day, one group plays 18, the other group plays 9. I just wondered if the other courses, the other men's club and the ladies' clubs have something like that in policy?
They do. Each one's a little bit different. And we've discussed this, Todd and I, and Wednesdays we're going to kind of leave alone as best we can because some of you are doing double shotguns, and we don't want to interrupt that. But if it's frost, as you know, you've got things that you put in play. So 7:30 is what we're looking for Wednesday, but the rest of the days it's 7:45.
Okay, so this is an informational item, and if you get questions from residents about the change, you now know what the plan is and the rationale.
Yes.
Bill?
Polite questions go to me. All the complaints go to Pat, please. Thank you.
Okay, did you have more?
I do. I have just one more thing. I just wanted to give an overseeding update. Desert Trails, Grandview, Pebblebrook are all scheduled to reopen next Tuesday, the 16th, and we're not looking at any cart path restrictions on these courses. the weather was perfect for overseeding this year. First courses, we had a few delays, or we kind of sat back and waited for the rain to pass through and some of the wind events. But these last three have really come in great. So therefore, we'll be able to let them out on the car paths on opening day. Just a reminder, please stay on the car paths as much as possible. Observe the 90-degree rule, fill divots, repair ball marks, and brake bunkers.
Okay, sounds good. All right, I thank you for a very long meeting, and let's go to director comments. Harry, have any comments? Harry, any comments from you? Oh, he's gone. He thought I was done. Okay, let's go around the room. Ann, any comments?
No.
Donna?
No comment.
Tim?
No, just a comment. Congratulations to Todd for such a great overseeing. The courses look absolutely magnificent.
Yes, they do. Jim?
Two things. I agree with the Gorse. I live on 18 of Grandview, and I've watched your folks do good work, and they do. It's fun to watch, and the results are great. The other thing is, Donna, you've been working on these RR&Ps, and I think it's a pain in the neck and all of that, and I appreciate their effort, but I also think that it's a focus that needed to be drawn into the RR&Ps, because when I became president of the wood shop in 2015, and I didn't know what RR&Ps were, and I was asked to sign a thing, and I signed it not knowing what I was signing, and I didn't know we even had RR&Ps. So this, I think, has drawn a focus that's going to be very useful for clubs, and even as restrictive as sometimes it feels, but it's all for our own good, and I think it's good. So I appreciate the work you've done. Thank you very much.
Okay, Roberta, comments? Lisa?
Yes, I would like to thank Kathy for this week for stepping in and filling in for Karen. She's helped me tremendously because I had my sports pavilion meeting and she had to help me with my packages and then again with today's packages. So thank you, Kathy, so much for helping us and keeping us afloat.
And getting everything ready for today, too. Sharon?
Yeah, just two comments. One, same ditto what Lisa said. It was very nice working with you. And as to the 7th tee at Grandview, it looks great too.
Okay. Bill, do you have some comments for us?
No, when I grab the microphone. Just a little bit of an update and maybe a get out in front apology. But Carl is doing tremendous work on all of the repairs and all the capital improvements going on at the R.H. Johnson Center. That runs through January. There will be a 2-week shutdown. And it really, unfortunately, we're dealing with a lot of projects at the same time, availability of contractors, availability of products. You know, you all heard it on the news and whatnot. So we're kind of at some mercy of some outside resources trying to get some of these things done. But there is a period coming up where the pool will be shut down, unfortunately, over the Thanksgiving holiday. And we are getting a handful of comment forms coming our way regarding that. But there are still 3 recreation centers fully functioning, and we've got some outlets for people to continue to enjoy. But we got a little downtime at R.H. Johnson. I just want to let you guys know if you guys started getting blistered with any kind of lovely phone calls.
Sure, and that will happen, I'm sure. Okay, our next meeting is going to be November 18th. Lecture hall. And then after that, our workshop will be in December, and our committee meetings and workshops during the month of December will be held in room 5 at Kuntz, because we'll be doing some renovations here. So just a reminder in terms of that. And then I want to remind Riley, if you would talk with Bruce Hart about his questions from earlier, that would be good. And any other comments from the audience?
One last.
Oh, Roberta thought of something.
I just wanted to say Properties is not going to meet in December.
Okay, Properties has been canceled, and also Sports Pavilion is not meeting in December, and that happens. And then we'll see in terms of our meetings how much we have on the agenda as to what happens with those, which is kind of typical for the month of December, but we'll see where we go from that. Okay, anything else for the good of the order? Okay, thank you very much for a long meeting. The meeting is adjourned.